Well, hello everyone. This is Councillor Graham Campbell as a co-convener of SNP Socialists. I'm joining with my co-convener, Janis Wilson. Hi, Janis. Hey, this has been another quiet week in politics. God,
I know.
we've had so much rest, quiet, almost nothing's happened. What about this week?
This week was not a surprise and a huge surprise at once. So, yeah, John Swinney, not a surprise. Kate Forbes, maybe it's not a surprise, but it's what I didn't want to happen. But, you know, better deputy as leader. So, yeah.
Well, let's unpack the surprises in all of that. I mean, there was clearly, when John Swinney had announced that he was going to going for leader, which was a week ago in politics, we had an inkling that he'd already talked to Kate Forbes.
Yeah.
So I think he must have negotiated this deal before he even stood. So I think that's why there was such a delay. Those few days before he announced, that was when he agreed this deal. So it was all about, Kate Forbes was always going to come back in the cabinet. The question is which job she would have. So let's unpick the jobs. The things that we were worried about is obviously we didn't think she should be in charge of the finance, budget setting brief, because we think she was, not the best person with her neoliberal politics to approach the ideas to the market economy, everything. We didn't think it would be good having that person in charge. However, what she's been given, she's deputy FM, but she has been given Gallic and responsibility for the economy, for economic growth, essentially. And so that seems to be the deal. She's been given a brief on that, and I think Swinney's calculated that will bring on side that section of the membership and maybe even some members of the voting public, which has been skeptical about SNP's relationship with business. And I think that's why he's done that. That's a signalling thing. It also obviously buys peace within the party because it means her supporters, and one of them, Ivan McKee, my local MSP, has been brought into the government in the junior minister positions. I think that's mainly to sort of placate that. I think, with Ivan McKee being brought in as a major supporter of Kate Forbes, that kind of balances the cabinet out a bit in their strength. So essentially we've lost the Greens in the cabinet and we've got Kate Forbes and her allies in the government in replacement for it. What do you reckon for that? Is that good for the left progressive, direction, that we'd hope would be maintained?
Possibly not. Is it good for unity? Yeah. Is it good to bring the Hamza v. Kate debates that we had at the last leadership election? Is it good to bring these two people together? Absolutely. Is Gallic good? 100%. That's fantastic. It's also, I would say, when I had a look on the steps of Butte House, there's far more women than men, which is good. So there are positives. But there's Kate Forbes.
Well, it is mostly Hamza's cabinet, though. Basically, everybody who was in Hamza's cabinet, pretty much, with the exception of Jamie losing the independence brief, as Jamie Hepburn losing the independent brief.
Has that brief gone?
The way that they've said it is that essentially it's gone because every minister will be a minister for independence. That's how it's been.
Okay, I didn't pick up on that. Okay, that's interesting.
But it's a measure that it is clearly being, the signal it's sending is it's deprioritizing spending all that money on government documents that nobody's going to read, even if they're reasonably good ones. And it seemed that they're not preparing for independence like any time in the next 2 years running up to the Holyrood elections. It means this is the government's going to concentrate on the practicals of cost of living, the general direction of policy around child poverty, which is what John Swinney said. It's worth remembering, and I think one of our members pointed this out, I think it was Olaf, that basically that Kate Forbes, when she was economy secretary and finance secretary, she did in fact introduce the Scottish child payment, which is, as I always say, is a game changer. So on the one hand, we might be worried about her personal politics, but actually, as the representative of that government, she in fact delivered one of the best reforms that it has carried out. So, while, people will say, I might leave the party if Kate's in, maybe I felt a little bit like that. But actually, if you look at the balance of the cabinet, it's essentially Hamza's cabinet. It's essentially everybody's in the same jobs. And I'm very glad in particular that Shona Robinson, while she's not deputy FM, she is going to be in control of the budget again. So that's somebody with clear left credentials who is in charge of the direction of the finance. So in a way, I'm kind of reassured that those people all staying in their places, Neil Gray's health, Myra McCallan, staying in her position. There's a good, honest, they're going to centre left people who are going to stay in government, stay in their position. So the maintaining of that direction, I think it mostly will be all right. That said, though, it won't be greatly imaginative. John's is pragmatic. He wants to keep the team together, and this will do that. There's no doubt that it will do that. We all were happy when John took over because we thought that, yes, that's the right person to unify this team in the run up to her 2 elections that we've got.
Well, an election this year, yeah. Yeah, I mean, in terms of Kate, I don't know how much damage she can do to the buffer zone, the policy that's going through Parliament. I know she voted for it at stage 1. And somebody pointed out that she may well table amendments to kind of water it down. And I think that's something we need to pay attention to. Because it has to go through.
Janice, you've muted yourself.
She can't water that down. And that is something that I'll certainly be looking out for.
So we missed quite a lot of that. Could you repeat it?
Oh, sorry.
You're
talking about the buffer zones, the buffer zone policy that she voted for at stage 1. It's the potential that she could perhaps water it down when it comes to the final vote. And I think it's important to keep an eye on her regarding that particular policy, because it's one that is a very progressive policy. It's one that we need to wholeheartedly support and vote for. So yeah, I'll be paying attention to how she progresses with that particular topic.
Funnily enough, I was at the launch that John had at Glasgow University on earlier in the week, where everybody was there. So basically, this cabinet was there. Well, most of Glasgow City Council's leading cabinet members were there, including the leader, and a few media and a few headquarters stuff. And it was just interesting the sequencing. They had Lorna, the National Secretary, did the shortest speech ever introducing a new leader. Literally said, there was only one nomination, and I introduced John Swinney, who is now the leader, and then stepped off stage. That was it. So it was quite bizarre, and it was interesting how John dealt with the questions from the mainstream media. I mean, there were some idiotic questions from James Cook from the BBC, the Daily Mail guy. I don't even know the guy's name, but they both asked really stupid questions. But it was interesting the range of questions that the obvious one you should ask, is, can you recover this in time for the election? Aren't you just refreshing the same team that already failed on things like health, education, blah, blah. They're always talking about how terrible education is in Scotland when we've got record exam results and record, young people's destinations, record numbers of young people from working class backgrounds go to uni. Apparently our education is terrible. Apparently. That narrative is highest paid
teachers as well.
Yeah, that too. So, John gently and, firmly dealt with those really deftly, because of he's got the experience. So I think on that level, John's, handling of it was superb. But I had a chat with Ivan McKee there, and of course he was very cagey about, he must have already known he was going to return to government as a minister. And he's been made a minister in, he's going to be in Shona Robinson's department. So he's a minister under the finance secretary's brief. So my slight concern is that somebody who I know is, center ground on economics, is an ex-businessman, and he's still a businessman. So he's very big on the market economy and the normal way that capitalism operates. So that person will be a Kate Forbes supporter in that department, influencing the direction, how we spend money, and also how we generate wealth. Now, that may not be in itself a bad thing, because if that means that business people and markets and everybody have confidence that this government's going to do economic growth, that's great. But the main change that we've seen in terms of direction has been the loss of the well-being economy idea. That has been dropped from the titles of the ministries. So we've clearly shifted away from a green just transition a bit. We've still got some of that. We've still got net zero. Myra McCallum's still in place, but the dropping of the well-being economy is a clear shift away from that, pointing in the left direction.
Yeah. Has it been replaced with anything?
No, that I can see. It's just been left vacant ideologically. Right. So I think that's clearly a signal that Kate and co have shifted the government's direction more to the centre. We can't deny that. That's a shift to the centre. The question then is, what practical policies does it come up with? And, if John says his priority is child poverty, then what other measures are there going to be? It may be that some of those will be good progressive reforms. But, if it's relying on a strategy for economic growth that's mainstream neoliberal economics, it's not going to work. That's the first thing I would say is that, look at the way this UK economy has worked over the last few years. It's a basket case, partly because of the errors of that trust government, but it's, people's real costs around mortgage, taxation, just general economic environment is not great. And the levers the Scottish government has to do anything about those are very slim and limited to the taxation powers we have. And we've used them to create progressive taxation. So I can't see what more they can do to create much economic growth. But if that's their strategy, I'd be interested to see what it's going to deliver.
Do you think they will alter the tax brackets? Do you think that's something that they will consider to bring them more in line with the rest of the UK, which isn't a great thing at all? Or do you think they'll keep them as they are?
There is a philosophy, I think, that people like Kate Forbes will have, which will say that you can't overtax the very wealthy or the upper bands of the middle class, because there's a point at which you will not receive more revenue for the higher percentage rate. I think there's some truth to that, and there's I'm all for taxing the rich fairly, and making them pay their taxes and not avoid it. The question is how do you get them to pay it and stay? Now, we've proven that with higher tax brackets and banding, that the rich don't move themselves.
No.
Despite all the threats to do so, in fact, more people are coming to Scotland. So we've got an environment where we can tax higher, and it works because people get more back for it, because they get free tuition for their kids, they get free health, they get all these things that we have in a decent civilized society, because we're in Scotland and we're under SNP government. So it's not putting people off having that higher tax bracket because they're getting more for it. So as long as you're getting more for it, I think people will put up with that. The question is, are they getting more for it? So that's going to be my test of this government, is what it actually does.
Yeah. I mean, I know we've got the Westminster elections this year, and obviously we've got the manifesto coming out for that, which I believe was going to put independence front and centre.
Mm-hmm.
How will that work out? That won't change with Swinney's new leadership. That will still remain. Sorry, on you go.
No, that will remain as it. Will the line one, sentence one, stay in place?
Yeah.
Even if it does symbolically, what will it mean? Because we've had loads of mandates, people pointed that out in debates we've had this week. We have no official way or means democratically of making this come about, or them respecting our mandates. I think Keir Starmer coming into government at the end of this year is highly unlikely to change that situation. Not unless the SNP wins all of the Westminster seats. And we can all agree that's not going to happen, but we could still win the election in Scotland, but be left with a government that's equally resistant to agreeing to any kind of choice. So maybe we were down the route of, Scotland needs more powers. And maybe we talk about more devolved powers. I mean, that was the Tommy Shepherd motion that came to conference last year, that we should have a specific set of measures that we ask for if we don't get a referendum, to move the thing on a bit before the Hollywood election, so that there's more powers coming to Scotland, do something about the economy, do something about what we can spend on the public services. These are the things that we will have if we want to tackle the cost of living crisis. It's clear that that's the main topic for the public and the electorate. The powers that they've got don't actually allow them to fix the problems that people are telling us that are the most important to them.
And then the Holyrood election becomes a de facto referendum?
Yes, I'm in favour of that strategy staying, but clearly it's going to be, I mean, John's strategy is always been one of those gradualists from the 20 years ago. He's always the ones who said, we must govern competently to show that Scotland can be an independent country. And that is clearly.
And he's right. He's right. Yeah, he's right. And I also have high hopes of him kind of uniting the party and bringing on people who wouldn't necessarily perhaps vote SNP, especially when Starmer is making such a bad job as Labour leader down south, regarding his U-turns on almost every single thing that he was elected leader on, and also his stance on Gaza, which I don't think we can ignore. He's now calling for a ceasefire. Now that they're doing what they said they wouldn't, and they're invading Rafah. And it's far too little, far too late. And I think it's going to be interesting to see the people who stand in the Westminster elections as independents and the pro-Palestine candidates. I think that's something we need to look out for. And I also think, I've not heard John Spinney's view on the conflict.
John did an interview with... Sorry, I was saying that John did an interview with Amjad Bashir, and Amjad's interview was spot on with him. He basically said...
Okay, I missed that, sorry.
Yeah, so basically Amjad got John to say, yes, he's for ending of arms sales to Israel. He wants recognition of Palestine. He wants the UK government to stop sending arms. And so he's very clear on those questions, and that he commended Humza for his clarity on it too. So the government's stance is not going to change all those questions. So I suppose in terms of support, the section of the population that really passionately cares about Gaza and about what's happening in Palestine has already been lost to Labour. But they would have calculated that they will win more defections from the Tory vote to replace that sort of left-leaning electorate. So that's their calculation, that they can afford to lose them, which, very, very disrespectful and all of that. But that's Labour through and through. I mean, when you've got people like David Lammy, who are actually sponsored by pro-Israel lobby people, it's not a great surprise that they're not probably going to denounce the Israeli government for its atrocities against the Palestinians. Emily
Thorburn as well. But what was interesting yesterday was the person crossing the floor to join Labour.
Yeah.
I can't remember, Elphick? Somebody Elphick?
Natalie Elphick by name.
But I kind of watched it, and I just thought, the Labour government, when I was growing up in the 80s under Thatcher, if somebody had tried to cross from the Tory bench to the Labour bench, there would have been an absolute outcry. But now they're like, you come on, open arms. We've got the same policies as you anyway, but we're doing them with a red rosette. And it's interesting to see that none of the socialists, in inverted commas, in the Labour Party, if there are any left, are commenting on this. Certainly not in this area here where I stay in East Lothian. They're still patting Keir Starmer on the back saying, well done. And it's incredible. It's incredible.
The only person I know from Scotland, Scottish Labour, who's denounced it has been Neil Findlay, the former Labour MSP, and he would denounce it, and he was very angry about it. And I know that there are lots of Labour MPs down south who are very, very angry about it, particularly women, particularly black women members who have been fighting racism and sexism and misogyny of the kind that Natalie Elphick's politics has been creating. That woman is a very, very evil, nasty politician. She's a Boris Johnson UKIP type, and if something like that is welcome in the Labour Party, the Labour Party is certainly a changed Labour Party. It's just changed into something that's incompatible with any, democratic socialist voting intention.
Just horrific. And I don't think she'll be the last. I think as they realise that it's the damage limitation now, isn't it? And if they know they're going to be welcomed by the Labour Party, they're going to walk the floor because they'll get elected as Labour MPs. And
I should say that in her case, like with the doctor from, the doctor who defected last week, neither of them are standing again, but they've obviously been offered some position.
Well, they're not. Okay, right.
You'll see, they won't stand as MPs, but they'll probably be put in the House of Lords. That's the standard, inducement, isn't it? So let's see if he puts them in the House of Lords.
Okay. That'll be interesting.
Or on a quango. They'll be on some quango, some research facility, or, how to make nuclear weapons. Natalie Elphick's going to help you decide how to do that.
I chose the wrong career. I should have been a politician, and yeah.
Well, mate, I am a politician. I'm chosen the wrong career. This thing of having principles and then trying to implement them, that's bad. When you're in the broad church, our wonderful broad church. A lot has been said about the broad church, the SNP, and it being a national movement, and who it represents. It's got its left, it's got its right, it's got its centre. I think Ailey had a piece on Ungagged not long ago about, how she understood the left and the right and the centre. I don't know if she quite got the right, but it's still important that the different, groups of people that support different angles, the Kates and so on, they're inconsistent. It's not like before when you could say somebody was a fundamentalist and somebody was a gradualist around independence. It's a bit more murky. Our lineups since the sort of transphobic wing left and joined Alba, clearly that very right wing has gone, but we still have a centre and we still have a left. And it's that mix of how the centre and the left will stay together. What can we agree on that's progressive, that takes us in a forward direction? What's your sort of take on it? About
how we can work together?
Yeah, between, what principled, relationship we have with centrists who seem to be running our government.
I think it's about, it's, I don't know. I don't know. Give and take, priorities, and what you're willing to, kind of roll back in terms of principles. I don't know. I've got nothing in common with centrists. So I can't imagine me sitting down and kind of, I'd find it quite difficult, but then I'm not in government, and in government, you've got to kind of, you've got to prioritise. And, there's a word I'm looking for and I can't think of it at the moment. It was in my head a minute ago. Compromise. That's the word.
Compromise.
I think you've got to think about what you're willing to compromise to meet middle ground. So I suppose if you've got centrists, you've got far left, you've got to come together somewhere in the centre left. And I don't think it's an impossible task. I think when you consider that, not everyone in Scotland is left wing, you've got a lot of centrists. And I think you've just got to ensure, like you say, a broad church, something for everyone, and compromises will have to be made.
I have to say the experience of local government, and this week I was 7 years in the job, so it's a great anniversary for me as well. So I thought, my goodness, I've been in this 7 years, and what I've done, can say from experience of being in a council group, obviously we've got the same balance. We're mostly Humza supporters, but there's one or two Kate supporters there as well. And if you're looking at, on most social policies, they're not greatly different. They may differ slightly on the degree they want, thriving business, obviously, to come to Glasgow and create jobs, and the relative level of enthusiasm they have. Some are very, very enthusiastic about Police Scotland. I'm less enthusiastic because of my experience as a human being of a non-white origin. I kind of have a very different take on how to hold police accountable. So even amongst my group, there's a very different approach to it. So we make compromises in order to get our main policies across around housing, around, reforming the council, defending public services, getting community empowerment going. And that we can show that we've got real tangible things we have done which have made a real difference to people's lives. So as long as those things are there, and those policies at a national level are there, that Glasgow continues to thrive, that cities start to get a grip around the housing crisis, that the local government is funded properly, these are all questions which John will have to tackle. We had not just the Butte House agreement, we actually had the Verity House agreement, which was meant to empower local government. So I'd like to see if John will live up to that promise to make local government a bit more autonomous and self-governing in the financial department. Because if it can be, then that would be a positive thing, that councils can produce real results on the ground if they're given the powers and the funding.
One of the headlines I noticed yesterday, and I tend not to look at newspapers, but one of them was a housing charity asking for the £200 million that had been taken out of the housing budget. And, it would be amazing if it could get put back into the housing budget. But what is your view on that? What do you think the Scottish Government can do with limited funds, limited resources to plug that gap? Is it something that can be done with compromises?
The trouble that all of these social questions have is they all come up against the independence question. The reason why, if devolution worked, then there would be no need for a nationalist movement. If it was possible to solve any of these questions of infrastructure, social well-being, economic equality, if it was possible to solve any of those things under devolution, do you not think that politicians would have done that by the last 20 years? The point is that structure is not possible. Devolution is not possible to challenge or change any of those things. That's Neil Gray was saying on debate night during the week. The majority of its time is spent mitigating against the negative impact of UK government policy around welfare and the economy and so on. We're mitigating. We've reached the limit of what 14 years of Tory austerity have done to Scotland's budgets over this time. If we could have done it with that far reduced budget for the country coming from the UK government, do you not think that any government would have done that? Jack McConnell returned £1 billion worth of unspent funds because he didn't know what he was doing. Well,
1.5 billion, I believe it was. Imagine 1.5 billion. Yep.
So those days are well gone, so that's the point. Devolution cannot be made to work. The point is we need independence for all of those questions. The infrastructure you need to sort out, for example, insulation of existing buildings, never mind insulation of new buildings. That's billions and billions and billions of pounds. The transition from oil to renewables, oil and gas to renewables. We've got the threat to Grangemouth now. So they're subsidizing that rat, Jim Ratcliffe, to the tunes of hundreds of millions of pounds, so it can close the main oil terminal in the country, not replace it with a renewable form of energy. These are the things that we're not in control of. These are vital things. We need independent powers to do anything about that. Now, people who are honest about it know that. And I wish that those who are criticising Scottish Government not coming in suggest how and what budget it should take this money from to do it. Because they gave 80 million to housing, which is, okay, it's a good contribution. It's a good start, but it's not going to solve our housing crisis, which is immense as it is in the rest of the UK. But we've done more about it because we've got rid of right to buy years ago, and we've been building council houses than anybody else. I think it's 120,000. So at least we're contributing to solving the problem, but we don't have the full powers to do the whole job. And people have to understand that that's what is the problem.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Absolutely. 100% right. But I'm just thinking, as we go into this general election, those are things that are going to come up on the doors.
Waiting list, things like that. Yeah, quite rightly so. People will raise, my health service appointments. The waiting lists are longer than they have been. They're way less longer than they are in England and Wales, but that's no small comfort if you're in a part of Scotland where the health service is not accessible to you yet. We're going to be answerable for that, and quite rightly so. And, we've obviously over prioritized health and education at the expense of most other things. So things like college places are being let down. That's one area where we're not doing well, and we have to solve that problem so that college lecturers aren't on strike, because we have to give them fair pay, we have to give them fair wage and fair funding for that section of the education sector. But we have to decide what role in the economy it plays. There's a fundamental big decisions which we don't have the powers in the Scottish government to sort out. That's the truth of it.
Yeah.
And of course, our opponents are wise. They will ask us to solve things that they know we haven't got money to solve. Thank you, Janice. And
thank you very much.
See you next week, because I'm sure nothing will have changed by next week.
Not much, no.